Hi, my name is Andrea Bromfield, and I will be presenting African Americans in Education for my final in Black Studies. This is from Chapter 5 of our textbook. Introduction. Before the Civil War, it was difficult for African Americans to obtain a proper education. Information was relayed orally. This caused there to be many illiterate enslaved peoples. Once enslaved people entered the working scene, the employed tactic of eavesdropping and pick up on news and other useful information was in habit. Adapting the skill of reading and writing. Granted, the law and custom in the antebellum South that prohibited enslaved people from learning to read and write, some did become literate. A method that enslaved people used was to pocket newspapers that were lying around that their masters may have had, or that were just dropped on the floor simply. The enslaved African Americans would convince a literate acquaintance to read it aloud and follow each word and phrase very particularly. Another method was to pay white men and boys to teach them to read. Continued. These activities obviously took place in secret due to the amount of trouble and harm that would come their way if revealed. African Americans would wait for their owners to leave, then proceeded to practice the reading and writing material. Reasoning. The ability to read and write meant that there was access to information, which also granted power. White slave owners feared black literacy due to this. Slave owners, of course, wanted to keep their slaves. African Americans learning to read and write would have granted them the ability to travel and move freely. This also would have given them the ability to leave the South and make a home up north. The rise of education. Between the years 1820 and 1860, a rise in racially segregated schools took place. Schools in the North had begun integrating both races in the school system. Whites believed that once black people entered schools, they would lower the quality of education received by white students, when in actuality, integrated schools would mean integrated neighborhoods. So there were many factors at play with this new change. But one of the most important ones, maybe not most important, but one that they didn't really realize, was that integrated schools would mean integrated neighborhoods. And they were only focusing on one thing at hand when there were many. The rise of education continued. States had the option to integrate same-race schools, but most did not. This left black communities to create their own private schools. Schools. Black schools were operated out of churches and people's homes. They did not have books, chalkboards, desks, or even writing utensils. I couldn't imagine that. Progressive Northerners in Northern institutions offered books for these impoverished schools. They gave English books, math books, and religion books for the children. The schools in the North were obviously aware of what was going on down South, So institutions, not only schools, but like other businesses would send down products for for the black businesses that were in the South. But a lot of it was from schools and for the schools. Curriculum. Curriculum in black schools was very different compared to the curriculum of white schools. The information was not as rigorous or comprehensive. Black schools were also often extremely overcrowded and inadequately funded. Black students received substandard education. There were some areas where schools hadn't been created or were closed down. This left some children without any education at all. Excuse me. Opinions. What is surprising? Excuse me, I'm sorry. What is surprising is that most Northern American leaders and progressive whites defended the system of segregated schools. They believed that segregated schools would help preserve cultural identity. They believed, and this is a quote directly from our book, better a segregated education than none at all. Now, this was from both white and black families or individuals. Frederick Douglass saw the value of integrated schools and persisted passionately for it. Massachusetts ended the use of segregated schools in the run-up of the Civil War. So to add, I was researching just to find more research regarding this topic, obviously, and I couldn't fully pinpoint what state first had an integrated school. So I'm still researching. The book says Massachusetts. I'm still looking. Public education and the quote-unquote race problem. African Americans that sought out education experienced many hardships and backlash. Poverty was a main obstacle for them. It was told to African Americans that their most appropriate type of work was industrial or domestic training. This impacted the kinds of skills they would need to thrive as members of society. Facts. Now, some of these are facts from the books. Some of these are facts that I pulled as I researched. Harmony between the races was maintained as long as Black Americans did not get above themselves and interacted with whites only when absolutely necessary. Facts. In 1851, the first Black history textbook was published. It was written by James Williams Charles Pennington. Facts. The first Black university was opened in Pennsylvania in the year 1849. It was opened by Charles Avery. The Allegheny Institute. These are my sources. Thank you. Have a good summer.